I'm Mike. Got kind of a last minute call planned today. I just traveled back from the USAPL Raw Nationals, so I'm still trying to get caught up and everything. So all the questions that were sent in, I'm just going to go ahead and answer those for this week, which there's some good ones in here. We didn't put out really a call to do this live, so I apologize about that. We'll try to get that going again for next week, but on weeks that I travel, it's kind of hard to get that stuff made back up. So with that, let's go on and get into some of these questions. First question up, as usual, we're going to start with executing the workout type questions. First one says, until now, I've been determining my target weight using my previous estimated 1 rep max and adding a few kilos. Is this okay considering I'm a fairly low level lifter who can progress quickly, or should I only decide to add weight after completing my workout sets based on my previous estimated 1 rep max? The important thing is that you're hitting your target RPE for your top set. So if it falls for, say, a triple at 9, and you're working out your target weights ahead of time, and you work those out, you add a couple kilos, and when you get to the gym, you actually hit the triple at 9, you know, we talk about having a little bit of forward lean to when you do this, and so when you pick your weights, you're shooting for something that's going to be a little bit challenging. You're shooting for something that pushes you a little bit, which it sounds like you have no problem doing that if you're adding a couple kilos. Now, if you do that, and you go and you go to the gym and you hit your triple at 9 with the target weight, then what you're doing is fine. What you're doing is good. The way that we teach it is to, just find a target weight using your estimated 1 rep max and then adjust as you're working up. However, the important thing is that you hit that top set. You're meeting the rep and RPE requirements for that. And if you're doing that, then you're not doing anything wrong. The only thing the target weights do is give you something to aim at. It's something, it's a reference point. Yeah, and it sounds like what you're doing, the method that you're employing is working all right for you. It's being that reference point that you need. So I don't see any real problems there. All right, next question up says, staying true to the RPE style of training, once target weights are set for the day, I find that once I hit the target weight, I can go a little bit heavier before it feels like a 9 RPE. The problem is, if and when I do that, I feel pretty gassed for the load drop and don't get very many sets down. Am I pushing too hard? Because of this, more recently, I've taken a more conservative, approach so that I can fit in a bit more volume. I think being a bit conservative is going to be beneficial. Let me tell you a story. I had a lifter, a master's lifter, who was a pretty high level guy, and he got to be more and more high level as we worked together. But whenever he would work up with these 9 RPEs and stuff like that, he would get really psyched up and really attack the weights for those top sets. And he was always wrecked. We always had problems with recovery, and we implemented all kinds of strategies to make sure he was getting enough recovery. And it was a big challenge because the central problem that we came back to is that, yeah, it's a 9 RPE, but it's one of those, like, you've really got to get into this aggressive mental state to perform at that level. And the way that we're writing training, we don't want you to have to go to that place, maybe a couple notches below that. We want you to be focused. We want you to be certainly concentrated and focused and, generating the tension that you need and all that stuff. But we don't want you to, have to find your dark place to execute training every week. So from the sound of it, being just one notch conservative is what it sounds like you're doing, and I think that's a good plan. You're going to get a bit more volume doing it that way, and in general, I think it's going to work out better for you. You'll have an easier time recovering, and the volume is going to be the main thing. You don't get like that last 0.5% or 1% of intensity, but that's going to have a much smaller impact than the volume or the recovery. All right. We have several program modification questions this week. And this first one we're going to dig into a little bit more as kind of a sort of case study in a way. So this is about Robert. And Robert says he had a competition. His bench was a personal best. It was the first time he had a personal best bench in 2 years. But the squat and the deadlift were down a bit. And he said that his lower back was very fatigued the whole time, through the whole meet, even in training, his lower back has been really torched for quite a while now. So the questions really center around that. So with that sort of context in mind, his first question up is, what modification would you make to improve lower back durability? Good question. So if your lower back is getting smoked in the training all the time, then it's getting trained, and eventually it's going to make the adaptation. We can make some tweaks and stuff, and we have some other questions that I think really nip it in the bud a little bit better. So we'll come back to modifications a bit in a second, but just the normal training, the normal stuff that you're doing that's taxing your back, that's going to be developmental. That's going to develop your work capacity. It's going to develop your ability to tolerate workload and so forth. So that's going to improve with time. The next question that you ask is, should I introduce special exercises to target the lower back? You could, but see, the problem is that we're identifying this as a limiting factor based on what's being fatigued. And we don't necessarily know if it's being fatigued because it's unable to produce force and it's working at a higher, relative output, or if it's being fatigued because it's having to compensate for something else, or things like that. Also, it's worth mentioning that your lower back was fatigued going into this meet, as fatigued in training leading up to the meet. We did not really taper for this meet. This was kind of a train through competition. So I think once we taper, you'll feel a bit better, but our tapers are generally not super low volume. They're generally not like full on deload weeks where you just sit on the couch. So with that in mind, with that in mind, I'm just trying to think about whether or not that's going to be beneficial for you in the long run. It might be helpful to send in some videos for like a weak range of motion analysis, because if the low back is your weak, like it is a weak link in your chain, then yeah, certainly subbing out some special exercises will be beneficial. If it's not, then your time may be better spent elsewhere. If your lower back is being fatigued in training, like you're saying, then your work capacity should be developing over time anyway. I mean, that lower back is getting trained. You mentioned 600 tempo squats. That really fatigues your lower back. Well, if it's fatiguing your lower back, and I can definitely see where that would be the case, it's going to train your lower back, and all that volume is going to be good for development of your work capacity. You mentioned also that some exercises tax your lower back, but others do not. You mentioned like the slow eccentric tempo work definitely taxes your back. The moderately slow work sometimes does, but other things like deficit deadlifts really don't. That's okay. That's okay. That doesn't necessarily indicate anything to us, though. Just because there's so many other variables that we're not controlling for. I wouldn't necessarily do anything about that. The last question that you have regarding this is, how long should I rest before getting back into contest mode? Since you've got another contest coming up, and this was intended to be like a train through meet, as soon as possible. Now, I understand that you may need to take a day or 2 days or something like that to heal up and rest up before you get back into, heavy training and stuff like that. But keep that somewhat to a minimum. You don't want to lose a whole lot of momentum in this week when you get back to training because of the ramp up to the previous competition. Excuse me, and the ramp up to the previous competition and the meet week and things like that. You've had a bit of lower volume. You're going to take a couple more days off. That's still, that's no volume. So when you get back into full-on training, that volume is going to go back up, and you're going to experience a little bit of soreness. We don't want to delay that too long, especially since we're going to be doing more comp lifts next week. We don't want to have a whole lot of residual soreness for that. So get back into it as soon as you can, even if you have to reduce volume or reduce RPE or something like that. All right. Next question up says, what do you do when you feel like an injury is coming on? I used a wide grip on the bench press, and something felt wrong on my left shoulder on the top set for the day. Should I rest the pressing movements or use a closer grip for the bench and accessory work? My next meet is a month away. Well, good on you for stopping the movement, stopping where you're at. You definitely don't want to put your bad position and turn, a little niggle into something that's, a full-blown injury. So good on you for stopping when you did. As far as what to do going forward, it's just kind of a proceed with caution thing. Since it's not really an injury, it's just something that's not quite right here. Just go ahead and proceed with your training. Ramp up slowly. Be mindful of how it feels. If everything feels okay, then I guess everything's okay. You didn't have an actual injury to begin with, so I can't think of a reason why you would not train. If everything is not okay, then of course you need to make some modifications. If it's just kind of a one-time thing, then it's not something that we generally worry about too much. But if it's something that's happening on a repeated basis, for instance, if you go back to the gym and it's still there, then yeah, we're going to want to do something about that. But it's hard to tell what it is because we don't know what the injury is, we don't know what the severity is or anything like that. So for right now, we're kind of in a holding pattern. You just kind of play it by ear. We are deferring until we get some more information. And then once you have that information, definitely let me know. All right, next question says the deadlift came up very comfortably until just above my knee, and then my issue with the rounded upper back came into play again. I managed to lock it out, but I wasn't giving the lift. I resorted to leaning back to get my shoulders in line, and the weight ended up sliding up my upper leg for an inch or so. The only thing that I can think of that might help is snatch grip deadlifts. Any suggestions? So what you're talking about is the classic lockout issue. Whenever somebody has a problem locking out on the deadlift, you know how everybody backstage is all yelling, hips, hips, hips. It's almost never a problem with hip extension, almost never. Getting the hips through is mechanically fairly easy. The problem is that for people that are struggling to lock out their deadlifts, it's they're 9 times out of 10 they're starting in a round back position. So they start in a round back position, and they stand up and they get their hips through, and then what has to happen? Well, then they have all the spinal extension left. So the trouble isn't the hip extension, the trouble is the spinal extension. So what you're describing, and I know that you realize that you're itching with spinal extension, but the reason I bring that up is that that's the same with pretty much everybody that has a problem locking out a deadlift. It's always spinal extension. And that's why rack pulls don't transfer well, because you start in in an advantage position. Everybody gets really straight and gets their back vertical, so they can pull a mountain. You know, so rack pulls don't transition well because they're not training spinal extension. You need to do something that's going to train the spinal extension. Fortunately for you, training the competition deadlift, since that mimics that it doesn't just mimic, it is exactly your competition technique. You will train spinal extension in your competition deadlift. Some other things that you can try: doing special exercises that will target the lockout of your deadlift. If you have bands or chains, you can include those. Maybe drop something like deficit deadlifts, include bands or chains. When you do rack pulls, make sure that you're mimicking the position that you're in when you're actually locking out a deadlift in competition. When you do your pause deadlifts, pause right around knee level. You know, so for most people, and just kind of the default answer, we're pausing off the floor. For you, you have a weak lockout, or that's your weak range of motion. So I want you to pause around knee level. And for most people with a weak lockout, that's actually where they lose most of their bar speed. So if you can train that to become a bit stronger and not lose as much bar speed there, you'll find it an easier time with hip extension, or excuse me, with spinal extension. As far as actually developing real spinal extension, that's where your supplemental exercises are going to come into play. I recommend things like front squats, like safety bar work, back raises, reverse hypers, things like that are going to help with spinal extension. Also, Zercher squats will help with spinal extension. Good mornings, things like that. That's where you're going to want to train your lower back. You're going to want to train all the back exercises that you classically think of. One thing that I found that helped me a lot training spinal extension: seated Zercher good mornings. And that's not typical for me to recommend exercises that far off the beaten track, but hear me out. You hold the bar in a Zercher position, you sit down on a high box, and you do seated good morning in that position. Now, what I want you to do is when you lock out, I want you to really accentuate the lockout. Really raise your chest as you lock out. Accentuate that spinal extension. You don't need a lot of weight. Work up to it slowly, and you'll find that that's a really hard exercise. And you want to do that as a supplemental lift, so for higher repetitions. I think I've got a video of that somewhere on my YouTube, so it might be worth a search. I didn't think of it until we started talking here, so I don't have it pulled up for you. Yeah, do a search for seated Zercher good morning, Mike here, and I think you'll be able to find something. I'm pretty sure I posted about it before. All right, we do have several scheduling questions for this week. It seems like we had some competitions happen over the weekend, which is good. I'm glad that you guys are getting out there and competing, but a lot of us were competing, and as my schedule was thrown off on the return trip, I think the same thing happened for a lot of you guys. So we have a few scheduling questions. This first one says, I was only able to fit in day one and deadlifts from day two in my training last week. My body was feeling beat up, my mental game wasn't there, life just got in the way. How do I go about compensating for last week's missed sessions? Should I just continue on with this week's plan that you sent me below, or something else? So this happens sometimes. Sometimes it just happens, and it happens to everybody. Don't worry about it. You got in the highest priority work, so at least you got that in, and I don't think you'll see much more than just a small negative consequence for that. Yeah, no problem. As far as moving forward, next week, I checked out your program. Next week, you have doubles, or this week rather, you have doubles, and that's kind of the heaviest week in your training cycle, and I'd hate to see you miss that. So I want you to go ahead and do the doubles, and you've probably already gotten a jump on this so far this week. Do the doubles, and then continue on. So basically the stuff that you missed from last week, we throw that away and we're just kind of moving forward with this week. Those first couple workouts with the doubles, let's keep those the same. Now your second 2 workouts, let's add a rep to everything and 1 rep to all the exercises. So basically everything is going to be slightly lower intensity, slightly higher volume, and that's going to help you bounce back a little bit quicker. It'll help get our volume stores rebuilt a little bit faster. So that's my recommendation. The next scheduling question says, I'll be unable to hit the gym October 26th through the 30th. My plan was to do the priority 1 and 2 workouts on the 31st and the 1st, and then get back on track the next week. Yes, but you want to be cautious with that. So the 31st is a Saturday, the 1st is a Sunday. It's good that you're hitting those priority 1 and 2 workouts. The only thing that you're going to want to be conscious of is that the next week's training, you don't want to do a big workout on Saturday, a big workout on Sunday, and then roll right into the next week's training with another big workout on Monday and another big workout on Tuesday. I mean, that's 4 big workouts in a row, and if you're not used to that, that's not a recipe for success. So what you could do is just space everything out a day. So if you're training Saturday and Sunday when you get back, reduce the volume a little bit, maybe cut out that 3rd exercise, just to prevent too much accumulated fatigue, too much soreness. So that's Saturday and Sunday. And then when you get to Monday, if you rest on Monday, and then pick up your regularly scheduled program on Tuesday. So if you go Tuesday, Wednesday, rest Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then the next week you should be back to normal. It depends a little bit on what your normal weekly training days are, but assuming that you're going Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, like most of us, then that would be my recommendation. The point is just to not string together and pack together too many really heavy, hard-working days all at once. If we pack them all together too tight, that can cause some problems. We want to make sure that you're getting recovered. So space it out enough so that you're recovering a bit. That week that you're gone is not going to be a week that you can. It's kind of a loss one way or another. You're hitting the priority 1 and 2 workouts, so we're keeping those losses to a minimum. Let's not let it bleed over and disrupt training too much in the following week. All right. Let's see. We have a GPP question for this week. This one says, is it okay to do conditioning work, jogging in my case, the morning of a training session when I'll be training in the evening, or do you think it would negatively affect your training? I do think it would negatively affect your training. My preference, and it really depends on your priorities. My preference is that you do any sort of energy system work like jogging or swimming or anything like that as far away from workouts as possible. So non-training days are a good option. If you have to do it on a training day, my preference would be that you do it after a workout, hopefully several hours after a workout. So if you train in the morning and then you jog in the evening, that would be better, I think. Yeah, I think that would be better. However, with that said, I know that may not be an option for you. If you have to train, if you have to do your energy system work in the morning and then train with weights in the evening, then that's just the reality, and we'll make that work. It may not be optimal, it may not be ideal, but we'll figure out a way to make it work. So I would recommend that you try to separate it differently, but do what you gotta, and we'll figure it out. All right, we have 2 videos to watch, so let me get those pulled up. All right, video time. This first video up is of Garrett squat, and we're going to be reviewing this one for weak range of motion. All right, let's back that up. One more time. There we go. All right. And I'll pause it here in the bottom. Okay, so to me, it looks like you're a little bit hesitant in the hole. You slow down a lot, and it looks like you're trying to find your depth. If that's the case, then that should get better with time. The more you practice, just regular squatting, the better it's going to get. Be patient with it though, because when I say that, I don't mean, in 12 weeks it's going to be better or something like that. Although it should be marginally better in a few months. But this is going to be a long-term thing that you work on for maybe the next year, year and a half or something. Gradually, you'll get a little bit faster, a little bit more comfortable finding your depth. Your speed starts out good, and I'm definitely not telling you to dive bomb your squats, not at all. But your speed starts out good at the top, but then you start to slow down a lot as you're looking for the bottom. What we would want to see is you to hit that hole with a little bit more confidence, with a little bit more certainty of where you're going. Don't rush that process. That'll get better with time. The pause squats will also help with that. In terms of weak range of motion, you pop it out of the bottom pretty good, but like most people, your weak range of motion in the raw squat is right at 90 degrees when your hips are in line with your knees. So let me see. I don't know if I'll be able to stop it right at that position or not. Yeah, I missed it. So video's kind of freaking out on me a little bit. Well, the good news is, well, I'm not sure if it's necessarily good news. It's just news. It looks like in terms of weak range of motion, it's very typical. This is what we always see. That's the same weak range of motion that everybody pretty much has in the raw squat. For you, in this case, I would say a weak muscle group is going to be hips and hip extension. To a much lesser extent, knee extension and quads. But so when you're selecting your special exercises, your supplemental exercises, make sure you're selecting stuff that targets hip extension. Wide stance good mornings, regular good mornings, RDL, straight leg deadlifts, stuff like that. That'll be where you want to go. Stuff that targets quads and quad involvement is still going to be beneficial. It just won't be quite as beneficial to you as the hip extension stuff will be. All right, the next video is of the bench press, and same sort of thing for this one. We want to review this one for weak range of motion. All right, not bad. Not bad at all. Your weak range of motion for this one is kind of, so again with the bench, raw bench, everybody's weak in the bottom-ish of the lift. So even me, if you were watching my benching at Raw Nationals, I missed my third bench. You can't get any closer to locking out than where I was at. It's physically as close as you can get to locking out as you can be without actually locking out the weight. That said, my weak range of motion is still nearer the bottom because I may start out with a good bar speed, but all that bar speed bleeds off and it just becomes a grind fest until you run out of gas. Now that's my bench press. Watching your bench press, your weak range of motion is still near the bottom. The trick is to determine whether it's actually the bottom or more kind of on the bottom end of mid-range. We make the distinction right around the 5 centimeter mark. If where you lose the most bar speed is right around 5 centimeters off your chest, then we say there and below qualifies as a bottom end weakness. If it's 5 centimeters or above, then we say that it's more of a mid-range weakness, up to, up until you get higher up and it becomes lockout weakness. That said, you look like you're right on the border. So what I would recommend is train the bottom range of motion. When in doubt, train the lower range of motion. So with your special exercises, do pause benches, do pen presses, stuff like that. And your program's already set up to train the bottom end range of motion for your bench. So you don't need to make any modifications for that. That'll be taken care of. In terms of supplemental exercises, you want a good mix of things that train your shoulders and things that train your pecs. That's where you're going to get the most bang for your buck for your bench press, moving your bench press forward for right now. Things like dumbbell benches, things like flies, dips, stuff like that. That'll help train your pecs. Things like overhead pressing, incline pressing, stuff like that will help train your shoulders. All right. Okay. Next question has some explanation. This one says, I was wondering how many weeks the restoration phase is planned for my training group. I just asked because I'm quite keen to get back into a volume phase, and I'm sure I'm going to regret saying this. So the restoration phase for everyone that's in one right now is originally planned to be 3 weeks long. And I know, look, I'm feeling the same thing. I had a competition that didn't really go my way. I want to get back in the gym and start slinging some weights and start working my way out of this hole. However, that's not the responsible thing to do, and that's not the disciplined thing to do. We need to remain disciplined as athletes and responsible as athletes. So the thing that we're going to do, we're going to follow through on this 3-week restoration block. The goals for this restoration block are to reduce your overall resistance to volume work. So we're going to restore some sensitivity to volume training. We're going to let ourselves heal up for those of us that maybe have little dings and stuff here and there. We're going to get all that stuff healed up and taken care of so that when we do start the volume block, we can start it healthy. And even if you're not dinged up, that volume sensitivity, some coaches call it, restoring your current adaptive reserve and things like that, restoring that adaptive energy. That means that when we start the next block, you'll be more responsive. If we just start it now, we may very well get good results from it, but we'll get even better results if we're disciplined in this restoration block. And then the third thing, we need to train some movement patterns that we don't often get to train. We want to do some rotation work. We want to do a lot of extra upper back work, things like that. These movement patterns that get, pushed aside and neglected a good deal of the time in normal powerlifting training. We want to bring that stuff back in, make sure that it's not getting neglected all the time. And the hope is that that's going to increase our durability so that when we get into our next block, we won't be so easy to get injured. So we have really good goals for this restoration block and a good plan on how to achieve those goals. I know that the desire is to get back into getting stronger because that's what we're after. But this is going to set us up so that when we get back into that peaking block in another 3 weeks, that we'll get a lot better results from it. All right, and I would just like to note to everyone to please verify your competition dates. There have been a lot of competition date shuffles and changes, and I've done my best to keep up with all of it. So for the training that you get next weekend, the training that you will get on Friday or Saturday, one of those two, I want you to verify your competition date. The way that you can do that, look in the subject line of the email that I sent you, and there's 4 numbers in that subject line, and that is the month and day that I have on record for your competition. And just so you know, if it's, if you compete on November 19th and it says November 18th, that's close enough because the meet week is flexible by several days. So that is planning to peak you for that competition date. Many of you will not have a date in the subject line. That's okay as well. That means that we're training you for the next mock meet. So if you're training for a mock meet, what you want to see, basically you can disregard this because either no date or any date is going to be just fine for you. If you have a specific competition date within, say, the next 6 months, then make sure that's showing up on your in the subject line of the email that you get on Friday or Saturday. All right. Yeah, just a real quick kind of victory lap thing that we've got. I just want to say congratulations to Diana and to many of you who competed at Raw Nationals and at other competitions all over the world last weekend. A lot of you did excellent, but Diana sent me an email, so I just want to read what she had to say. She said, I don't have any questions, but I just wanted to personally thank you. I got second place in the 72 kilo junior division. My third meet ever. I increased my total by 82.7 pounds in 14 weeks. I wholeheartedly dedicate my bench PR, 192.9 pounds, to the small tweak you suggested. It really made a world of difference. We reviewed Diana's bench a couple weeks ago. I believe I might be asked to compete at Raw World, and I'm extremely excited to see what I can make in the time to come. That's so awesome. That's so awesome. That's an excellent performance. I know the training that I'm asking you guys to do is not easy, and so thank you for executing that workout with discipline and doing a good job with the execution, showing up to the meet, putting it on the line, and actually taking what was there. 82.7 pounds in 14 weeks. That's I'm jealous. I'm jealous. Maybe I should do that program. But that's excellent work, and I really do hope that you get to make it to the Raw World Championship. I think you're going to have a great time. That's definitely a one-of-a-kind experience. So that's all we've got for this week. As always, just want to thank everybody for watching. Send in any questions you've got. We'll get those taken care of and be back to our regularly scheduled deal next week. Yeah, thanks for watching. See you next time.